So translating this game into a XR game. This is a retro 2D game, 2D platformer game. Can we translate this into XR? Should we translate this into XR? Would it be better in XR? Would it be a good experience in XR? These are all things that we want to think about before we do things in XR. Or are you just doing it because it's cool? This, I think, would be fun, and it would be a good experience in XR if done well. It would create a very good sense of nostalgia to be able to do this. And there are multiple ways of doing it. But what you would want to think about can I copy images and put them in here? Copy image. Paste image. They're unavailable on the web. Okay, fine. That's dumb. Okay. I thought you used to be able to do that on the web version. I remember being able to do that on the web version. I thought I could do that on the web version. Maybe not. Anyway. So, how would we translate this into XR? One of the most important things to think about always with these games is, and I didn't have that problem with this one either because it was another 2D platformer, motion sickness. Always consider motion sickness. It's going to be the biggest issue that you're going to have with a platformer. With an immersive platformer. That's the biggest thing that you're going to have to think about, hands down, is motion sickness. And we did talk about this in the last one, what we would do about that. So let me see, to save time, I'm going to pull that one up so we can just talk through that. Give me a moment and I'll pull it up. It was the notes from trying to, and it's going to apply, the same thing's going to apply this time. Okay. So you want to follow motion sickness best practices for XR. And I have that. And I will make a note to include that in the show notes. But that is the biggest thing you're going to have to think about. So here, let's look at the website. You can see on the best practices articles and the human factors section, we talk about motion sickness. And motion sickness is a big deal. There are a lot of things that you can do. This talks about the neuroscience behind it and why the best practices are there for it. And it also has some more learning options that you can go to, and I have videos about it too. 360 animation, directing attention, and there's videos for learning more about these. And then external distractions are where we talk about, I think that's where we talk about auto progression and stuff. And that's especially something that you're wanting to think about if you're doing I didn't even mention auto progression here, but auto progression or manual progression is very important for XR experiences. Manual progression. Give them that power because many more distractions, because when you're distracted from a 2D game, it's not as big a deal because all you can do is look. All you gotta do is look. But when you're in XR, when you're in a VR experience, you have to either take off the headset completely, or if you have a Quest, you could possibly do pass-through, depending on what the distraction is. But it's taking you completely out of the experience if you are distracted by something in XR, in VR specifically. XR, like mixed reality and AR, aren't is going to be as big of a deal as it is with virtual reality, because the whole nature of the headset, of a virtual reality headset, is blocking off all of your senses, often including your hearing, so that the external, you can't see it, you can't hear it often. So when something from the external distracts you, you have to take all that stuff off. So auto-progressing something when you're in XR makes them miss the entire thing. So you want them to be able to stop. And one of the big ways of doing that is manual progression. Especially. They're not replaced, since all of your senses are, well, all of your sensors engaged in. But let's see. Especially for external distractions in VR. Follow the best practices for that as well, for manual progression. And consider, again, whether or not you want to do a first-person platformer or a third-person platformer in XR, especially. I don't know how, well, yeah, so I'm thinking VR versus mixed reality versus augmented reality. Okay. Augmented reality or mixed reality is going to be a different beast, I think, because you still got the real world. You still can see the real world, and you're still relying on real world's locomotion. Your locomotion in the real world is going to still need to be real world locomotion, like walking, physical movement, because of you as a viewer. Not necessarily of any characters of the game that you're playing, but of you specifically, still needs to follow those physics of the real world, unless of course you can experiment and see something really cool that I'm not seeing in my head right now, because you can still see the real world. So if you see yourself moving on some kind of virtual thing in mixed reality or in augmented reality, there's going to be a weird psychological thing going on there that breaks the experience, because you can still see the real world. It's still there. So I think with a mixed reality platform, you're probably going to more likely be doing something in third person. So here, I'll write that down. Mixed reality more likely needs to be third person. Okay. But VR. So if VR, consider whether you want it to be in first person or third person. Because if it's in first person, you have a much, much greater risk of motion sickness. And then you're going to have to add a lot more mitigations to it, but you may not like those mitigations. But if it's in third person, you still need mitigations depending on how you do it. And we're going to start playing VR experiences to see how they've mitigated it, how they've handled this. I cannot play first person platformers. I will get sick. unless there's one out there that has teleportation as an option for a platformer, which I don't really understand how that's going to make it an enjoyable platformer. I can't do it. I don't know how. So there's a challenge there. How would you make an enjoyable platformer that allows for teleportation? That's a challenge. If you can figure that out. But if it's third person, I would say don't attach the camera to the character, as in your camera to the character, because that is pretty much going to end up being the same problem that you have with first person, is that you're having that artificial motion. And that artificial motion, that disconnect between you moving in the real world versus you moving in the physical world, is what makes people sick. That disconnect in motion, whereas what you're seeing versus what you're feeling. So if you're doing it in third person, don't attach the camera to the character. And we have some examples of VR games that do a very good job of this in the platformers that we're going to be playing. I think I have 3 VR games that we're going to try, different ones, and see how they handle it. I think it's 3. So we will see that starting the week after next. Because again, I am doing a workshop next week with Circus Stream talking about XR UX designers and XR developers working together, and then I'll pick the stream back up the following week. But so if you're third person, don't attach the camera to the character if you want to reduce motion sickness and let more people play your game. If you don't care and you only want people who don't get motion sickness to play your game, you're going to be losing out on a very large target audience. But yeah, sure, that's what a lot of people are doing, and there are a lot of games out there that I'm not buying for the simple fact that they don't take motion sickness into account. So I don't buy them. And there are games that I don't buy because it's not clear whether or not they take motion sickness into account. So that's another thing that you want to make sure that people are able to know up front, is whether or not you're taking motion sickness into account. And that's something that you can only do. You can't assume. You have to test it. You have to test it with your target audience, not just your buddies in the studio. You have to test it with your target audience. And so if you detach the camera from the character, you can keep the player stable, and that's gonna, and it's not gonna have a forced motion. And we'll see this in the games that we're playing. I think they all handle it this way, in different ways, but they all handle it this way. It's detached from the character, and that is much, much better for people who are averse to motion sickness. And another thing, the cutscenes, because there were some cutscenes. How do you handle those? And it was kind of simple with the 2D game because you stay stable. It's not moving you around in those cutscenes where you, at least I don't think it was, in those cutscenes where you were talking to the boss or anything. The camera was stable and it was just the characters moving. That's all you need. That is the simplest, easiest way to handle a cutscene, is just have the characters move, not the scene. And you can pay attention to Baobab. It's a very good example of how they handle their cinematic VR experiences. And I will include that in show notes as well. Cutscenes, just writing it down. They mitigate motion sickness in they are very good cinematic features. They are fun experiences, and they do a very good job of mitigating that motion sickness. So they're a good example. So study what they do and follow that. And that is all that I can think about. If you have any other comments, please do feel free to mention those, or on YouTube later if you're watching it later. Make your comments, and that is it for this time. And again, I will be out. Won't be streaming next week, but it will be back the following week. So April, whatever April 7th or whatever that is. We'll be back then. So I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, follow, subscribe, tell your friends, like, share, all that. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.